Hi, Steve Sandner here, and I've got some very odd lighting, but I think it'll work out all right. How do you find gigs? Well, I'll tell you some of my experiences. When I started out, my dad got me gigs. He got me a summer gig after my first year in college, and I didn't really want the gig. He just said, Steve, go over here and audition for this place. It was Holiday Inn near our house, and my dad was playing there a couple of nights a week, and they wanted somebody for some of the other nights. And I said, oh, well, I'll try it, but I'm sure I don't have a chance of getting the gig, Just to keep my dad quiet, I went over and I auditioned for this gig. And the manager came in smiling and said, okay, you've got the gig. And I said, what? I was completely surprised and ended up playing the gig. And ended up having a fun summer, making some money, playing music. And when you're playing live gigs, you're not necessarily going to make a fortune. But there really is nothing like it, playing music for people who appreciate it and who react to your music in some way. Although some of the gigs are background music, and even those gigs can be fulfilling in a way because you're supplying an atmosphere, and you'll always find at least a couple of people who are going to be listening to your music. Of course, you'd rather have the showcase gig where you get to showcase your talents and have a full-blown audience reaction. Those great gigs are what we live for, and they don't necessarily happen all the time. But back to how to get gigs. When I got into college, I started jamming with some musicians. There were some musicians actually jamming in the basement of my dorm. And I went down there, and they were playing bass and sax, and they were playing this kind of avant-garde jazz. And there was a piano sitting right there, so I just didn't even ask them. I just jumped in and started playing piano. And we did some like weird outside, they called it free jazz at the time. It was kind of a popular thing for a half a minute. And they thought this was cool, that we were playing free jazz. But eventually, the bass player got me a gig playing 3 nights a week at a local pub, and that paid some good money. And so there's one way to get gigs. Hang around with musicians and go to some jam sessions. There are still jam sessions around, maybe not as many as there used to be, but of course hanging around musicians in general is going to help you find gigs. When I was at Berklee School of Music, that crowd was a gig magnet. People would call the Berklee dorm to find musicians for gigs, and I got in on a couple of those gigs. One time I was hanging around the Musicians Cafe, and I hardly ever went there. But the one time I went there, my dorm mates who lived down the hall said, hey, I'm looking for a piano player to play 7 nights a week at this club in downtown Boston. And I said, sure, I'll be happy to do it. So I played that gig for about 6 weeks. And that helped me to go home with some money after my summer at Berklee School of Music. Then I found out that getting gigs isn't always easy. When I went to Detroit, I went through all the agents in the entire city of Detroit and Ann Arbor, and I called them up, and I got a couple of auditions. And one of the first auditions I got was with a very accomplished, well-known clarinet player who had played with Benny Goodman. And I thought, oh wow, I'm going to get this gig. I was just bursting with confidence. So I went over and played for him, and it turned out that my skills in transposing weren't that good. So when he turned me down for that gig, I was devastated, but I went into the practice room and I practiced transposing the most difficult tunes I could think of, like Body and Soul and When Sunny Gets Blue, Stardust, all the old standards, and I would play them in all 7 keys, all 12 keys actually. And that really helped my mind get into a state where I could transpose keys. So in one of the auditions that came up after that, the guy said, well, we need somebody who can transpose because you're going to be working with a singer who doesn't sing in the normal keys. I said, yep, I can absolutely do that. So that gig didn't last very long, but it wasn't our fault. It wasn't the musician's fault. That's another long story. But he felt apologetic at the end of the gig, and he had helped me learn to sing a few songs during this gig, and he gave me some advice that helped me a lot. He said, you're not going to really get that many gigs just playing piano. You need to learn how to sing. So he would coach me in singing during the breaks of this gig. And at the end of the gig, I had 6 songs that I could do fairly well. I'm sure they weren't that good, but I had 6 songs that I could sing. So he gave me the name of another agent, and I called him up, and he said, oh, we're looking for somebody at this gig at a resort up in northern Michigan, and we need a piano player who sings. And I go, oh, well, I'm your guy. So I went and I auditioned for that. And sure enough, that led to expanding my singing, because I went from learning 6 songs or knowing 6 songs to learning dozens of songs. And so my advice to especially singers who want to go into professional singing, I recommend you learn how to accompany yourself on an instrument, on guitar or piano. Your chances of getting gigs are going to be expanded greatly if you can accompany yourself, even if you're not a fantastic instrumentalist or you're not that accomplished. If you can accompany yourself to some degree, you'll be able to find gigs, and then you can always do other gigs where you can find an accompanist who's accomplished, who can maybe make you sound a little bit better. But there is something about a single performer who can accompany themselves. So that's it. I've had some tight places where I've had to actually go out and do some cold calls, knock on doors. I think my position as a solo pianist singer helps in that I'm self-contained, and I can sometimes even create a job. If there's a restaurant that doesn't have live music, I can go into the restaurant and maybe talk the owner into having live music 1 or 2 nights a week, and that has happened occasionally in the past. So then you can find gigs, you can create a little side income for yourself, or possibly go into it full time. So that's my little tiny piece of advice if you're looking for some music gigs. I'll have more on this in the future, I'm sure. This is just a little tiny slice of my experiences. So again, thanks for listening, and if you like the video, please like the page or give me a thumbs up on the YouTube page. Thank you.